A chair slides across the room, moved by an invisible hand. A woman is hurled from her seat and starts speaking in a voice that isn't her own. These aren't scenes from a horror movie. These are real events witnessed by police officers, child protective services, and medical staff. Professionals who were so baffled, they documented these paranormal attacks in official reports. So, what happens when a haunting stops being a ghost story and starts being treated like a violent crime? Welcome to the Diabolist's Lab, a place where faith, fear, and forbidden truths collide. Most ghost stories are just that, stories. Creepy noises, fleeting shadows, the feeling you're being watched. But for some families, the terror becomes dangerously physical. They report being pushed, scratched, and even thrown by a force they can't see. The attacks get so aggressive, they have no choice but to call the one group trained to handle violent assailants, the police. But how can the authorities possibly investigate a crime when the suspect might be a ghost? Tonight we're looking at 3 hauntings so violent, they cross the line into criminal investigations, leaving behind a trail of official documents and bewildered authorities. Enter if you dare. Exit if you can. And don't forget, if these tales intrigue or disturb you, hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe to the Diabolist's Lab on YouTube and TikTok. Watch till the end, and if it resonates with you, consider supporting our work through the Ko-fi link below. Every contribution helps keep the lab running and the darkness illuminated. Now, let's begin. Connecticut's cursed home, when the dead won't rest. Our first case takes us to the unassuming, yet utterly horrifying, residence at 208 Meriden Avenue in Southington, Connecticut. In 1986, the Snedeker family, Carmen and Al, with their 4 children, moved into this seemingly ordinary house. They sought a fresh start, a home close to the hospital where their eldest son, Philip, was undergoing cancer treatment. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a living nightmare, a paranormal assault so relentless it would eventually draw in renowned demonologists and become one of the most chillingly documented poltergeist cases in modern history. It began subtly, as these things always do. Soon after moving in, the family discovered a dark secret. Their new home had once been a funeral parlor. The basement, in particular, retained the grim tools of its past: embalming instruments, body lifts, and even drains in the floor where embalming fluids had once flowed. This discovery, unsettling in itself, quickly became terrifying. The children, especially Philip, began reporting shadowy figures in the house. Alarms were sounded, not by ordinary intruders, but by an unseen force. The family would hear unearthly sounds, disembodied whispers, the clang of tools in the basement, guttural growls emanating from empty rooms. The activity quickly went from unsettling to outright violent. Objects moved on their own, disappearing from one place and reappearing in another. Beds would shake violently in the dead of night. Philip, already weakened by his cancer treatment, claimed to see terrifying apparitions, including a demonic entity with long, dark hair. He reported being sexually assaulted by these unseen forces, a horrifying claim that pushed the family to their breaking point. Carmen and Al themselves witnessed doors slamming shut, disembodied voices, and terrifying temperature drops. The children's personalities began to shift. displaying erratic behavior and speaking of dark visions reminiscent of possession. Desperate and terrified, the Snedekers reached out for help. They contacted Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famous demonologists. What transpired next was a full-scale investigation, with the Warrens documenting extreme levels of demonic activity. Lorraine Warren herself described the house as being infested by an inhuman entity that caused physical manifestations. Priests were brought in to perform multiple exorcisms, attempting to cleanse the property of its malevolent occupants. The Snedeker family endured months of relentless terror, their lives irrevocably scarred by the forces that held their home captive. The case became public, with official reports and testimonies painting a chilling picture of a family under siege by an unseen, malevolent enemy. They eventually fled, abandoning the house to its sinister legacy, leaving behind a chilling testament that some homes are not merely houses, but open doorways to the infernal. The Enfield Poltergeist. Next, we crossed the Atlantic to North London in 1977. In a modest council house at 284 Green Street, a single mother, Peggy Hodgson, was raising her 4 children. Their ordinary life was shattered on the night of August 30th, when an unseen force began to terrorize them, focusing its violent energy on 11-year-old Janet. The activity became so physically aggressive that the police were called, and a female police constable ended up signing a formal affidavit, testifying to what she saw. It started with the kids' beds shaking at night, which Peggy first dismissed as them fooling around. But the next evening she heard a shuffling sound from their room. When she went to check, she saw a heavy chest of drawers slide several feet across the floor, all by itself. She tried to push it back, but it felt like something was pushing against her. Terrified, she grabbed her children and ran to a neighbor's house for help, and they called the police. When woman police constable Carolyn Heaps arrived, she walked into a scene of pure fear. Like any good officer, she was looking for a logical explanation. What she found defied all reason. In her official witness statement, WPC Heaps described hearing loud, unexplainable knocks on the walls. Then, as she stood in the living room, she witnessed an armchair wobble, lift slightly into the air, and slide about 4 feet across the floor with no one near it. She checked the floor for any unevenness, even placing a marble down to see if it would roll, but it didn't. The chair had moved on its own. Despite witnessing the impossible, the police had to conclude this wasn't a matter for law enforcement. No crime, technically, had been committed, and who could they possibly arrest? But their involvement gave the family's story a chilling legitimacy. It was no longer just a frightening tale. It was an event witnessed by an officer of the law. The investigation was eventually taken over by paranormal researchers who documented thousands of strange events, from Janet being thrown out of her bed to objects flying through the air. The Enfield Poltergeist remains a deeply polarizing case, but the signed statement from a police constable, an officer trained to report just the facts, makes it one of the most compelling examples of a haunting investigated as a genuine physical assault. The Perron Family Haunting. For our final story, we go to Harrisville, Rhode Island, and the 14-room farmhouse that would become infamous as the Conjuring House. In 1971, Roger and Carolyn Perron moved in with their 5 daughters, completely unaware of the property's dark past. For the next decade, the family was subjected to a haunting so brutal both physically and psychologically, that it caught the attention of the country's most famous paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren. And while the police weren't the primary investigators, their presence was needed to manage the chaos that followed. It started with small, unsettling things. Carolyn would hear the sound of a broom sweeping in the kitchen, only to find the broom put away and a new pile of dirt on the floor she'd just cleaned. The children started seeing spirits, some harmless, others deeply menacing. Soon the whole family started smelling rotting flesh, and their beds would shake violently at 5:15 a.m. every single morning. The entity tormenting the family was believed to be the spirit of Bathsheba Sherman, a woman who lived on the property in the 1800s and was rumored to be a Satanist. The haunting escalated to direct physical attacks, mostly against Carolyn. She would wake up with strange bruises and puncture wounds, as if she'd been stabbed by a large, thick needle. The family's breaking point came during a séance held by the Warrens. According to the oldest daughter, Andrea, who said she secretly watched the event, her mother's chair levitated, and then she was thrown violently across the room. Carolyn began speaking in a language that wasn't of this world, her body contorting in unnatural ways. The Warrens believed she was possessed. While the film adaptation shows a police officer actively helping the Warrens, the true extent of official police involvement in the investigation itself is debated. However, law enforcement was definitely aware of the terrifying situation, and in the years after the movie's release, police were called repeatedly to deal with trespassers drawn to the infamous house. The Warrens treated the farmhouse like a crime scene, documenting every incident, from flying objects to physical assaults. They were building a case against a non-human entity. The physical marks left on Carolyn Perron were evidence of an assault as real as any other. The only difference was the attacker had been dead for over a century. These three cases are so chilling because the violence wasn't just a story. It was witnessed and documented by the authorities. From police reports to DCS files, the evidence suggests these families were being physically assaulted. Have you ever heard a story where a haunting got so violent the police had to get involved? Share it in the comments below. Darkness doesn't always hide. Sometimes it invites you in. A chair sliding across a London floor right in front of a police officer. A mother violently hurled from her seat in a Rhode Island farmhouse. These aren't just campfire tales. They are real events that forced skeptical, trained professionals to write down the impossible in official reports. They represent that terrifying place where the paranormal and the criminal collide, where the tools of an investigation were used not to find a person, but a presence. And they leave us with a deeply unsettling question. When something from another world commits a crime in ours, who are you supposed to call? And what kind of justice can you possibly expect? If this video left you questioning everything, show your support with a like and drop a comment with your theory. Subscribe to the Diabolists Lab on YouTube and TikTok, and if our work speaks to you, consider fueling the fire through the Ko-fi link in the description. And remember, keep your eyes open and your doors locked. Evil waits for those who open the wrong one.